So just taking off on that song, because it's a perfect tee-up, yeah? Yeah. So walking in the love of God, knowing that we walk in the love of God is obviously the great challenge and the great opportunity of the everyday, normal walking around life. And all of these great mystics, the great poets and those who have sort of lifted the veil of that feeling of separation from the presence and, describe this almost like drunken state, without any substances. It's the being, just consumed by this awareness, and the flooding of that is to have all of that discomfort and all of that, the pain and the suffering and everything sort of fall away. And it falls away not because you've chipped it away, but because in the context of who you are, there is no suffering. And so I was thinking sort of like metaphors to play with today. And I remember when I was a little kid and I had an aquarium and had some fish in there, as long as they would live. They were in there, and it didn't go well with me and aquariums and fish. It was somehow neglectful. Okay, I'll just own it. But I remember at times fish would get all excited, and one would jump out, and fall like on the table. And I remember the look on that fish's face was sheer terror, and like, oh my God, what's happened here? This, the flopping around is not making this any better. And I thought, I've seen that face on a lot of people. I've had that face myself, I'm sure, at times. And so much of that is just wanting to return, to get back into the sea, the infinite sense of being, and not feel that sense of separation, that sense of alienation from our natural state, from the peace and the love and the joy that is our natural ability. And when we realize that the spirituality has nothing whatsoever to do of sort of convincing a reluctant God to somehow, bless us and give us something or give us some circumstances or some situations that would be so much easier for us to deal with and to handle. And this whole idea of a God that's just waiting for your Christmas list, just send it up, and we'll see what we can do. That is so much based upon our sense of separation. That is so much an invention of the ego, of the part of us that feels separate from our well-being, separate from love and peace and joy. And when we're in that mindset, we are like that fish that is out of water. It doesn't feel right. And when we're not really clear about why that is, we tend to think it's because of our circumstances and our situations, and not that we have had an experience of separation from our soul, from that sense of losing our connection with the truth of our being. That's what causes us to suffer. So I wanted to talk today about this lesson, which comes from, many of you may have recognized it. It comes from A Course in Miracles. I'm going to read it again. It was part of our meditation. And it says, I can give up, but what was never real. I sacrifice illusions, nothing more. And as illusions go, I find the gifts illusions tried to hide, awaiting me in shining welcome and in readiness to give God's ancient message to me. His memory abides in every gift that I receive of him. And every dream serves only to conceal the self, which is God's only Son, the likeness of himself, the Holy One who still abides in him, forever as he still abides in me. In the Upanishads, the ancient scriptures that go back even farther than our Bible, it says this, lead me from the unreal to the real. From the unreal to the real. And lead me from the darkness to the light. And lead me from the temporary to the eternal. When we're talking about what we're really wanting is nothing more and nothing less than to have our eyes opened. And I know that when I go away, like I just did for a couple of weeks, the first couple of days on vacation, maybe you can relate to this, are sort of like I've stopped physically, but there's this frenetic energy that's still running through my body. So you're not moving, but the mind is just still sort of unraveling or unwinding or winding down. And then it's a very interesting phenomenon. I don't know if you can relate to this or not, but there's a sense that when I get up about on the third day of my vacation, and I realize there's nothing on my calendar, there's nothing on my agenda for the day. We sort of intentionally do that, Denise and I, when we go away. We just let things sort of arise. And then I realize that in that silence and without that next thing that I need to do, which is the normal course of things, there's a discomfort. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? It's uncomfortable. It's like there's something wrong here because I can't fill the time-space, slot. And so my mind just sort of feels like it's sort of like sloshing around, like unset jello, and it's just kind of sloshing around, and I'm wanting it to take some kind of form so that I can, I know what's next. So unfamiliar are we with the spaciousness of our own being, the unstructured, the formless nature of ourselves, that when we create space intentionally for that, which is what all the great spiritual teachers have said, just simply sit and be. And many people don't meditate because they feel like that unstructured space is like, the workshop of the devil or something. All their negative thoughts and everything sort of take off, and it's better to be thinking about something than just allowing that just to be spacious and open. But there's a point that it comes, and usually about the fourth or the fifth day, when I allow that silence and that emptiness to be like a womb, and that I embrace it. And I allow myself to sink into the warmth of simply being. And it's about just finally saying, I don't need to do anything to be who I am. I don't need to have any goals. I don't need to make any money. I don't have to be nice to anybody. I don't have to, create more abundance in the world. I don't have to do anything to be who I am and to appreciate who I am and to feel the satisfaction that doesn't require me to go out of this formless, quiet space. And the great paradox of this is that the surface mind or the ego mind is still going to be talking to us like, get off your butt and do something. You can't just sit here. There's people and there's unique situations, and what it's trying to claim us to is that if we give up this notion that we have to be doing something, then we are going to be found to be not enough. That our sense of value and our sense of enoughness has to do with what we're producing and what we're doing and what we're accomplishing. And that's a worldly understanding. It's not a spiritual idea. So it's an interesting walk that you and I have. And it's one that we need to do on a regular basis so that we can feel a sense of fulfillment in the space of our own being. So that we don't have to go out into the world and keep doing and overdoing and spending and overspending and building and overbuilding in order to find some sense of wholeness and well-being. Because if we can identify what's happened to our world, it's very much like a cancer, isn't it? It's a reproduction of the same activity and the searching and the seeking and the accomplishment and the striving and the yearning and all of that energy going in to try to make us feel like we're okay, that we're finally enough, that I can be seen, that look what he's done and look what he said and look how he's accomplished and look where he lives and look what he drives and whatever it is. We all have these false stories of self that need to go. I can sacrifice only illusions. And then what remains is what I am. What God made cannot be taken away. However, we think that all these precious things that if we gave them up, that would take away from who we are. It's the opposite of that, isn't it? It's who you are not that stands in the way when you identify with that, of knowing that peace and that wholeness and that well-being. It's so contradictory to the ego mind that we have to be very assiduous in reminding ourselves that we want to be led from the unreal to the real. Joan said it nicely about, is this the I? Is this the I that's occupying my attention right now, that's asking for my attention? Is it me? Or is it some other illusion, some other sense that I think I have to be doing something or showing up in a certain way so that I can feel that sense of wholeness and well-being? Jesus said, I'm the light of the world. And he said, you are the light of the world. And let your light shine. And he didn't say, you're the light of the world if you're making six figures and you marry the right person and you live in the right neighborhood and you get a couple of PhDs and you accomplish a lot. Period. You are the light of the world. He didn't say you are the light of the world if you had functional parents. He said, you are the light of the world. See, the thing is, I forget where we came from. And where we came from needs nothing. Course in Miracles says it in the preface. It says, the little I, that would be our ego self, little Larry, you have one too, seeks only to enhance itself by external approval, external possessions, and external love. The self that God created needs what? Nothing. And it is forever complete, safe, loved, and loving. It seeks to share rather than to get, to extend rather than to project. It has no needs and wants to join with others out of their mutual awareness of abundance. The little I seeks to enhance itself. And I know when this is happening to me. Do you know when this is happening to you? And it always has some version of a little discomfort followed by how you can tweak your life to get that to go away. It's the foundation of all addictions, obviously, because when we don't feel satisfied, we don't feel fulfilled, we don't feel like we're enough, dealing with that is challenging. And it's easy to think, if I can just adjust the way I'm having to experience my reality by kind of numbing out, then I don't have to deal with this discomfort. And what I'm learning more and more is that discomfort is the precursor to awakening. It's not a bad thing. Just like the proverbial caterpillar going through its metamorphosis. I'm sure that caterpillar is like going, this is not an easy walk. My journey, you guys see if you can do this. If you can actually melt your caterpillar, furry, fluffy body inside this dark place and become this sort of, I'm not a butterfly, I'm not a caterpillar, I don't know what I am. I'm just dissolving, and what remains, I don't know at this point, because I'm going through it. But I have seen butterflies, and I see how free they are, and I see that there's something in me that tells me that that same DNA is in me. That something's calling me to this metamorphosis, to this transformation, and it's going to require that I'm going to have to lay down some false sense of who I think I am so that I can be who I am. And that is, man, that is work, right? And surrender. Oh, it sounds so good when other people are talking about it, right? You got to surrender, man. And they're surrendering, and you're going like, yeah, I'm surrendering too. But what are we surrendering to, like Joan was saying? What do we believe in? Do we surrender in things that ameliorate our suffering, only to have us suffer again? Or are we willing to let go of some notions of who we think we are? And to sort of to stand in the fire of that, to not yet realize the fullness of our nature is going to be part of that process, that I'm going to have to be a little bit faithful on this path, and sometimes a lot faithful, because sometimes you can't see this emergence. All you can see is losses, that you're letting go of this and you're letting go of that, and you're supposed to be feeling so much better, but you don't. You feel like you're getting smaller. I'm shrinking. And it's only at the end of the story, when you realize that you had it all along. There's no shortcutting our spiritual growth and development. My awareness of what is representing me, but not being me, is my journey, is to become vigilant about that. And to see when it's rising up and it's wanting to be coddled and it's wanting to be clothed and it's wanting to be, seen as really important. But if I can sit and realize that's not who I am, then I can sit in the refining fire of truth. In all of comfort, as that begins to fall away, who I am can emerge. And that's the journey that you and I are on. I can't, what's the word? I just can't, whatever it is. I can't do it because it doesn't matter. I just can't, whatever it is. And I think you know what that is. Candy coat it, that's what I was going to say. We just have to kind of say it sometimes. The people that I've noticed in my 22 years in ministry who have really made progress are the most courageous people. They're the ones who've stood in the fire because they were listening just a little bit more attentively to the still small voice that says, stay with this. This is for you. Because, this is what Einstein said and so many of the spiritual teachers, that the universe is a friendly place. In other words, it's conspiring for you to awaken to who you are. But that voice is oftentimes drowned out by the voice of the ego, the voice of the separate self, with its constant list of needs and wants and desires for approval and satisfaction and enoughness. But if we are true to our spiritual path, we can get quiet enough to listen to see what that voice is saying that says, stay the course. Don't judge by appearances, but by righteous judgment, is what Jesus said. And he said, those who will seek to save their life will what? Will lose it. And those who lose their life will find eternal life. And that's what you and I are up against. We are here to release the temporal, the temporary, the false, so that we can awaken to this greater sense of who we are. And it will feel in some cases like a death. But what can die cannot be what you are. If it changes, if it can go, if it can be diminished, if it can be modified, then it's not you. And somehow there's a divine plan here that looks like an exfoliation. It's scrubbing away at all of those notions of who we think you are. And it's not against us. Even when it feels like it, when we're dealing in relationships with people who don't see us, and we get triggered, and we feel like someone's against us, and we feel like we're not being loved and treated the way that we should. There's a spiritual benefit to those moments. Because when we have those situations, we're given a chance to say, who am I really? Am I the one that needs to be treated a certain way or to be seen a certain way in order for me to know myself? If that's the case, then maybe my investigation needs to be deeper. Maybe my sense of who I am needs to stay here, not looking in the eyes of another person to see whether they see me. Because don't we know that that's flaky? And it rises and it falls, and they love me and she loves me not. And Denise and I had a big fight yesterday. It was so perfect for this talk, right? And we were just going at it, It's not as long as it used to be, We find a way to quickly go, oh, okay. But still, I'm wanting her to say something and see something in me, and she's wanting me to agree and see something in her. But we can see after a while that that's just one more orbital, exit from the truth of our being. It's just one more place to live apart from God, and one more place that we want to hang out, this like temporary, encampment that we set up. And we think that's where we'll be safe and that's when we'll be okay. But we've put ourselves farther from the source, farther from the truth. And so then we just have to go, wait a minute, what was I making this mean? And what was I requiring you to do so that I'd be okay? And what a ripoff that is. It's such a ripoff. And we do it, and we awaken, and we come back to ourselves, and we have a different conversation. That's what this community is really about. And it's not, sometimes I think it feels like, for some people, it feels like this is not good news. Because you feel like there's something that you got to do and it's kind of work, and you just want someone to tell you that, God loves you with an everlasting love. And just leave it at that. But, my experience is if you just leave it at that, there's a voice that's going to just rear up, its little ugly head, the little, me, what about me? And its long list of things that it needs. And it will forget that there is an everlasting love if we continue to sort of feed it. And so I sort of got while I was away that I need to be more vigilant in what I allow to sort of take over my mind and my thoughts. Because I'll run a story for a while. Anyone else run a story for a while how it needs to be for me to be okay? Is anyone just, okay, 4 of us. I don't know why I'm giving the talk. It shouldn't be me. But that whole thing about something that is sort of like under the surface, almost like a little, like a little burr under the saddle, that's constantly like saying, this is not it, this is not it. That's the part of us that needs to die. That's the part of us that came to this life experience to be seen through, that it is an illusion. We either accept that we are spiritual beings or we live a life of suffering. If we don't get that we are spiritual beings, and if we're not in pursuit of that knowing as the number one purpose for our existence, then we only prolong the suffering of a separate self that feels in exile from its well-being and its good and its love and the peace of God. And when we feel in exile from that, it's not because God has moved away. If God is omnipresent, the joke goes, and you don't feel the presence of God, who moved? Oh, no. It's that sort of like, wait a minute, if I'm not feeling peace right now, it's because, it's because somehow I've created a story that now is a list of things that have to be accomplished in order for me to feel peace right now. And those are the illusions. That's what the divine intention for my life and for your life would have us give up. To lay that down. There is no greater love than a God, presence, power, that only wants us to know the fullness of love and peace and joy. That's a love you and I are not familiar with, are we? Because how many of us grew up with that sort of unconditional love? And yet, that's what truth says is true, and what it calls me back to every moment of my life, is to come back to the love that I am seeking outside of myself, for the peace that I think is dependent upon life being a particular way. And isn't it just really at the core of all of our conflict in the world? Think about it. Everyone is trying to be happy and peaceful and feel love. And if we're following this ego's plan, which says this needs to be that way, and this needs to be that way, and you need to be this way, and you need to be that way, in order for me to be peace and happy, how could we possibly get along? So that the peace that passes all human understanding, which Jesus talked about, says that the peace that you and I are looking for is already here. It's already what I am. And for me to find it is not for me to, manipulate the landscape of my life or the world, but for me to find it. And then when I find it, then you don't have to be any different for me to have peace. And when I invite you into this understanding, or you see that I have this peace, even though you haven't changed, then I give you a model, something to be curious about, some place that you might want to stand as well. So we know that our best teachers are not the ones with the best rap. We know that our teachers are the ones that walk their talk. And that's what I look for in myself. That's what I look for in teachers. Over these years, I've met many well-known spiritual teachers. And I have to say that a handful of them are the real deal. I mean, it's pretty easy to have a good rap, Live in that truth. That's the refiner's fire. That's the rubber meeting the road. That's eating your words and digesting them and letting them change you from the inside out, no matter how uncomfortable it is. And it's not a great thing that you would be doing to do that. It is the most basic way of awakening to who you are. It's no big deal. But to the ego, to the part of me that thinks that life needs to be a certain way, it's a huge deal, right? So I got to start talking against this wave that constantly likes to, visit me. I have to begin to say, wait a minute, what's true right now? What I'm looking for is already here. This love that I'm all wanting, this peace, to be validated, to feel that I'm okay with myself. This is already here. So how is it that I'm not seeing this? How is that? What could be going on that if it's here and I'm not seeing it? What's the dynamic of my own personal experience that is standing in the way of this recognition? And it always comes back to you, to perception. It's the classic, metaphor of the wave that, comes rising up, and for a moment it has its own form and its own shape, and it feels like it's a wave. But really we know that wave has only assumed this form out of the dynamics of the movement of creation. But really, when it falls, it's just ocean. And was it ever not ocean? Was it ever not ocean? No, it was always ocean. You are always love and peace and joy, and so am I. This is really good news. It's really good. I mean, there's no better news than this. The Course says nothing real can be threatened, and nothing unreal exists. Nothing real can be threatened. Oh my God, think of all the things that threaten you. And these are the things that are not lasting. They're not of God. They're not of truth. They come and they go. And the longer we live, the more we have a story of stuff that comes and goes, and people come and people go, And what I think I had to have, I got it, and it wasn't enough. And then I got something else, and then that went. And then there was a new list. And they come and they go, and I have good days and I have bad days, and I'm getting what I want and I'm not getting what I want, and she loves me and she loves me not, and I have a lot of money and I lose all my money, and I have a house and now I don't have a house. The story goes on. What is real? What remains? What remains? This is what, whether it's a vacation or whether it's time sitting in the quiet, all of those noises of describing how life should be that are like, they pop up like, the whack-a-moles, they just keep popping up. You need this, and you need this, and you need him, and you need her, and you need that, and the boop, blah, blah. They're all popping up in the midst of our effort to know the truth. And realize that eventually, by observing them and seeing them for what they are, and not indulging in them, making them any more real, then eventually they begin to subside. And as they subside in the quiet, there's a sense of being, simply being. And the more we sit with that sense of being, the more we realize that it is not contained just here. It's an energy of presence. It's a vastness. It's a boundless sense of being that feels like it goes in all directions. We can't find a border to this sense of being. We can't find a place where being stops. And then we begin to approximate what it is to know the truth of us. What we know to be God's infinite being expressing as us. God's infinite being is not a little corner of heaven or some part of the universe that we have to somehow find our way to through good works or the good intentions or being deserving. God's infinite being is what we are. And when I let go of all of those things that I can begin to see are just accoutrements to my sense of self that have become my identity, there's a great party in heaven. There's a great celebration because it only wants us to know itself as us. The Creator would only want its creation to be us. We are its creation. Why would we possibly want to cover it over with some false, limited sense of being in which there is no way out of suffering? But there is. And you and I, many of us, are finding our way. Jesus said, there was that moment, when he knew he had to go into Jerusalem, and what was awaiting him there at the end. And he had this sense of it. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, God forbid it, he says. This can't be right. This must never happen to you. But Jesus turned to him and he said, get behind me. You are a stumbling block to me. For you are gripped by human things and not divine things. Jesus knew that whatever was real could not be threatened. And only love was real. And that anything that could be destroyed was only an illusion. And so he was willing to break down the final illusion of how we see ourselves as being attached to this human body, that it might be a lesson, that life can't be limited to the body, that life just takes the form of a body, just like it takes the form of everything. And he said, if you want to become my followers, deny yourself and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for this awakening will find it. For what does it profit you if you gain the whole world, but you give up your soul, your purpose for being? So many of us have settled. We've settled. I've settled. You've settled for a less than full life because we have invested heavily in the story of how life needs to be okay. So I'm rolling up my sleeves, guys. I know I can be more devoted to this practice than I have been. And I'm affirming that I will not let the busyness of my life, which, we know it gets there, right? To allow myself to build up this whole new persona around who I think I am. Because I am what God created me. And you are what God created you. Perfect, whole, and free. It has always been. It shall always be. And what came to die is that Halloween costume that many of us continue to wear. But it's combustible in the fire of truth and the transformation that you and I came here for. So let's know this in a moment of prayer. So, Spirit of the living truth, we stand here with an intention today to be willing to throw down on the fire of truth whatever is standing in the way of us knowing your presence, your power, your love as us. And even if we don't know what it is, we have an intention to be willing to allow that understanding, that aha, that insight to bubble up in the safety of this connection that we have with unconditional love. That there's nothing we can't look at. There's nothing we can't admit to or submit to, because everything that is real cannot harm us. Everything that is not real only has a limitation on who we are not. So let us this week be more honest. Let us be willing to bring forward those stories or those perceptions, those expectations that we have about life. If they stand in the way of knowing ourselves, let us have the courage to let them go, to lay them down. Because in this way, what Spirit has always been trying to do in you and I will be made more possible. Our willingness and Spirit's relentless intention to reveal itself as us is the way we awaken to the good, to the great, to the glory, to the truth, to the peace that we are here to know and be. And for this, we are beyond grateful. We submit ourselves to this, and we find new life. And so it is.